Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Katja, also known as Kat, and throughout July, I'm sharing a series of videos to help you complete our Reading the Globe Women in Translation August Challenge. And I'm not the only one. Do check out the videos from Roz from Scally Dandling about the books and Angelia from Read and Reread. Now, I thought it would be useful for me to dedicate one video per prompt, so hopefully you come away with one or maybe a few books that you'd love to add to your TBR. The first prompt is, read a woman author from a continent other than your own. So that entirely depends on where you live. I live in Europe, so many of today's recommendations from me are from Asia, South America, and Africa. If you're watching from another continent, simply flip that logic. At first glance, it sounds like a reading challenge, but really it's an invitation to discover writers you might never otherwise have picked up. That's one of the things I love most about Reading the Globe and Women in Translation Month. They gently nudge us towards doing something other than our usual, outside of our reading habits, and introduce us to voices and perspectives we might otherwise have missed. So looking over the books, I did realize that over the years of doing these challenges that I have a very obvious skewed interest in East Asian authors. So it's definitely become my biggest translated fiction rabbit hole. So Japanese, Korean, Taiwanese, and more recently Chinese literature have dominated my shelves. And I can tell you I have no regrets because they have such a range of stories that I've experienced. What I hope this section shows is that the East Asian literature that I've read and beyond isn't just one thing. I've got cozy and comforting recommendations, unsettling, provocative, historical, contemporary, reflective, and emotionally devastating ones. So a little bit for everyone. I'll start with the books that I've already read and can recommend. Add in the ones that Roz and I hosted read-alongs for last year, and finish with what's on my TBR for this particular prompt. So the first book I have to recommend is one that people know now quite well. It's Taiwan Travelogue. If you've been following this year's International Booker Prize, you'll probably recognize it as the year's winner. And I have to admit, I was absolutely delighted because while I didn't do International Booker this time, because usually I'd read the long list and then the short list. I didn't do it this time, but I had read the book. I'd not only read the book as well, I actually recommended it to the members of Reading the Globe Discord last year, well before it won the prize. And then I suddenly saw it popping up again on our Discord with people going, I can't get it because it's out of the, stock at the library and in my local bookshop and everything. So I'm really thrilled for the author. On the surface, it's a journey around 1930s Taiwan filled with incredible descriptions of food. Beneath that, it's an exploration of colonial history, language, identity, and relationships, especially not just people, but also countries, so Taiwan and Japan. It's slower paced than the books that I usually recommend, but I learned a huge amount about Taiwanese history without ever feeling lectured by this book. And although slow paced, it was a welcome slow pace, not the sort of one that you end up feeling bored by. It definitely rewards anyone who's into historical fiction because I ended up researching a lot more after I'd read the book. Then we have The Memory Police, where if you prefer her darker side, you'll be happy with this book. Set on an unnamed island, objects slowly begin disappearing. First ribbons, then birds, then flowers, one thing after the other. Eventually, entire concepts vanish from memory. And I listened to the audiobook, and the narrator was fantastic. Tracy Kato Kirayami. She had this understated way of narrating that fit the atmosphere perfectly. It's a novel about memory, authoritarianism, and what happens when people slowly stop questioning what's being taken away. Then we have Winter in Sokcho, and I love this book. I know it's not for everyone, but it really stayed with me after I read it, and it's translated really well. It's not a hugely long read and is set in a quiet South Korean seaside town during winter. It follows a young French-Korean woman whose life is disrupted by the arrival of a French graphic novelist. Very little actually happens on the surface, but that's the point. The Exploration of identity, belonging, and loneliness with remarkable subtlety is what really pulls you in, and you get to draw your own conclusions without everything being spelled out. So if you enjoy something that is reflective and rewards patience, I think this could be a book for you. The Lantern of Lost Memories. This one is cozy fiction, but it's also bittersweet and quietly devastating, ultimately leaving you with a sense of hope, yes, but yeah, it comes full circle. It's a sort of happier ending that's rewarded through your journey through the book. It's a difficult one to talk about without giving things away. So I think the best thing for me to do is just talk about the setting. Set in a magical photography studio between life and death, it follows people as they revisit one treasured memory before moving on. And it blends this sort of slice of life storytelling with magical realism and explores grief, love, and the moments that shape us. And the final story is the one that really made me cry, and I don't say that often. So that was the ice cream van. It is a sweltering hot day. I think you can tell because my hair is blowing because of the fan going. But yeah, that noise was the ice cream van. He's in big business at the moment. It is something like, I don't know, 97 Fahrenheit. It's hot. Another lovely, quirky recommendation is The Full Moon Coffee Shop. And like many Japanese cozy novels, it's made up of interconnected stories, but this time the cafe appears beneath a full moon, only appears beneath a full moon, and only to people who've reached a crossroads in their life. So instead of simply offering coffee and life advice, it's also run by talking cats who use each visitor's astrological birth chart to help them reflect on where life has taken them. And it sounds really random, and it sort of is, but it's also easy to accept, even if you're not into astrology. So I got into that comforting atmosphere, the gentle encouragement to pause and reflect, and the wonderfully imaginative premise. It's warm, magical, and just a little eccentric. Now, if you've ever believed that the right book can find you at the right moment, then I'd highly recommend What You Are Looking For Is in the Library. This is one of my favorite examples of Japanese healing fiction, and it follows 5 people who each arrive at a community library feeling stuck or at crossroads in their lives. Through the wonderfully enigmatic librarian, they're given unexpected book recommendations that turn out to be exactly what they need, although not always in the ways that they expect. It's a celebration of curiosity, second chances, and the power of books in their ability to change the direction of our lives. So if you enjoy something that's character-driven and leaves you quietly optimistic afterwards, this is a good read. Welcome to the Hunam bookshop. This one is like having a lovely conversation with a good friend. I'd highly recommend it to anyone who is sort of second guessing themselves in their life. So the story follows a woman who leaves behind a demanding career and an unhappy marriage to open a small bookshop in Seoul, which gradually becomes a place of comfort and connection for the people around her. And I love this because it's not a novel that is driven by dramatic twists or high stakes conflict. Instead, we're looking at healing, community, and discovering that a meaningful life is not always the sort of picture that society tells us a meaningful life would look like. It's one of those rare books that seems to find readers at exactly the right time. And that's how I felt about it. I completely understand why so many people enjoyed it, and I was one of them. If you've been feeling overwhelmed, questioning your priorities, or simply want a gentle, hopeful read that celebrates books, friendship, and small acts of kindness, I think this is a good one for you. Then I have Concerning My Daughter. This is a beautifully observed slice of life novel following an aging mother whose adult daughter moves back home with her girlfriend. Rather than presenting a simple story of conflict, it explores generational differences with nuance and compassion. And alongside questions of identity and acceptance, the novel also shines a light on how we care for the elderly, workplace discrimination, and the pressures of modern life. What I particularly admired was that none of it felt preachy. Instead, it's a quiet, thoughtful novel that asks difficult questions about family, empathy, and the different ways people try to build a meaningful life. It is LGBTQ+, and if you enjoy character-driven literary fiction that gives you plenty to reflect on, this is a good one. Gifted, if you're looking for contemporary Japanese literary fiction. Gifted is a good one. It's not my favorite, but I still find myself saying it's worth a read. It's quite short. At its heart, there's a deeply moving story about an estranged mother and daughter forced back into one another's lives as the mother approaches the end of her life. And the daughter works as a hostess in Tokyo's nightlife district. And it explores that world with remarkable sensitivity rather than judgment. What really stayed with me was how restrained the writing is. Much of the emotion sits beneath the surface, creating this quiet melancholy that mirrors the relationship itself. It's a story about grief, loneliness, memory, and the things families never quite manage to say aloud. So I think you'd enjoy it if you don't mind books that leave you feeling a little melancholy afterwards. It's definitely got content warning. It touches on physical abuse and emotional trauma. Then we have Hunchback, which did really well in last year's International Booker. It was shortlisted. And despite being just over 100 pages long, it is one of the most provocative books I've read in recent years. It follows Shaka, a wealthy woman with a severe physical disability whose sharp intellect and refusal to conform completely changes the stories that society tells about disabled people. She's funny, uncomfortably confrontational, and deeply human all at once. So it draws out the author's lived experience of disability. That feels incredibly authentic, particularly around bodily autonomy, desire, and power. It's not always an easy read. Some moments are deliberately unsettling, but it's exactly the sort of book that expands your understanding of lives and experiences you may never have considered before. And that brings us to the handful of books that we've read as group reads for Reading the Globe. So Roz and I hosted live shows for these titles. If you pick them, then you'd always be able to also tap into those live shows if you're interested about different perspectives. The one that I wholeheartedly recommend if you're looking to read beyond the countries that I was talking about and that tend to dominate translated literature, Ido's Souls by Stella Gaetano. This one is my first novel, the first book that I've read from a South Sudanese woman to be translated into English. And it is set against the backdrop of the Sudanese civil war and the eventual separation of Sudan and South Sudan. It follows several interconnected lives as people, ordinary people, navigate conflict, family, displacement, and change. And what stayed with me wasn't the war itself, but the humanity at the heart of the novel. So Gaetano gives each character dignity, allowing them to be complicated rather than heroic, while themes of motherhood, sisterhood, identity, and resilience are woven through the story. Despite tackling difficult subjects, the book actually never felt gratuitous, and the translation flowed so naturally that I forgot that it was a work of translation. It's a wonderful choice if you're looking to broaden the geographical range of your reading while discovering an author and publisher that deserve far more attention. And then we go back to Japan with Third Love. This is a quietly unsettling literary novel that blends contemporary Japan with dreamlike journeys into the past as the main character, Riko, slips into the lives of women from different periods of Japanese history. And through those dreams, the author explores love, loneliness, memory, gender expectations, and the ways our relationships shape us across a lifetime. Her writing is more detached and contemplative than the cozy Japanese fiction that I've been recommending to you. The emotional distance won't work for everyone. For me, though, it became one of those books that lingered after I'd read it because I really tapped into the historical settings. I think she did a lot of research into the past lives that the main character goes into. I can't say that I was a huge fan of the main story in the contemporary setting, but it was still a fascinating novel that made me want to read more of Kawakami. Clean. another novel I'd wholeheartedly recommend. And this one was our first ever Reading the Globe book last year and sparked one of the richest discussions we had had. So the story is narrated by Estella, a domestic worker whose employer's daughter has passed away, and we know that from the very first page. We know something terrible has happened, but we don't know what. And it follows like a mystery, but less so, because you expect it to be the suspense and almost a whodunit. And then instead you get this powerful exploration of class, race, resentment, and the people society often expects to remain invisible. Set against the backdrop of Chile's social protests, it's a novel that asks difficult questions without offering easy solutions. And Estella isn't always a reliable narrator, which makes you constantly question which memory ends and interpretation is now beginning. It's haunting, thought-provoking, and definitely one I recommend if you enjoy literary fiction that leaves you reflecting. It makes you work. So, yeah. And then we went on to read one of the most popular books at the time that it was released. So we tend to use or read backlist books so that they're more accessible. But everybody was interested in tapping into this book when it was released. So it's We Do Not Part by Han Kang. And like much of Kang's works, it's a novel that asks difficult questions rather than offering easy answers. And we start with a simple request to care for a friend's pet bird, and this main character, this woman, sets out on a journey that ends up being an exploration of grief and the long shadow cast by the Jeju massacre. It's balanced with intensely personal and collective traumas, showing how historical trauma echoes across generations. So I suppose what I'm saying is generational grief. Her writing moves effortlessly between the concrete and the dreamlike. It leaves you constantly questioning what is real without ever losing sight of the emotional truth at the novel's heart. It's not always an easy read, but it's an extraordinary one. And our Reading the Globe discussion lasted well over an hour because we're talking about symbolism, history, the interpretation of various scenes, and there was lots to unpack. So if you like, again, working for your conclusions, that's a good one. Finally, here are a couple that I am going to read for the prompt itself. Cocoon. It's been sitting on my shelf since 2023, and this feels like the perfect opportunity to pick it up. We've also created an additional chat area on the Discord for this book because there's actually a few of us who've been meaning to read Cocoon for a while. Set against the legacy of China's Cultural Revolution, it follows two young people as they uncover long-buried family secrets and examine how history continues to shape later generations. I've heard wonderful things about it, and I'm really looking forward to finally discovering it myself. Then to balance that, I am going all cozy again with The Healing Hippo of Hinodo Park. And it is one that revolves around an old hippo ride in a neighboring playground that locals believe has healing powers. So we've got 5 residents and they visit Kabuhiko, each hoping to mend a different part of their lives. And what unfolds is a series of warm, thoughtful stories about self-acceptance, community, and the ways that people help one another heal. It's about perspective, kindness, and giving ourselves permission to change. And yeah, I think that's a good one to actually end on because, like I say, I do tend to dive into some really heavy titles, but I always balance it with something this cozy. I say that's the end, but really I should say that our group read could double up. So the group read is The Door by Magda Szabo, and if you are not in Europe, then you could use this as matching the prompt to read an author that is not from your continent. It's Hungarian and reportedly beautifully translated, and explores the extraordinary relationship between a writer and her housekeeper. I've heard nothing but good about this book, which makes me very excited for our discussions in August. As you can probably tell, many of my recommendations did come from East Asia, because that's where I've, ended up gravitating towards. But Women in Translation is also a brilliant excuse to explore further afield. So I will definitely be doing that with the other prompts, and I'd love to hear your recommendations from Africa, the Middle East, South America, or anywhere else in the world that you think deserves more attention. So those are some of my recommendations for purely the first prompt, and I'd love to hear your recommendations. Let me know which continent you're reading from, which continent you're planning to explore, and if you could recommend just one woman in translation from another continent, which book would you choose? Next time, we are tackling our translated genre novel prompt. So I'm going to give that some good thought and come back with some genre novels that I've loved. Until then, happy reading, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.